Welcome back for another episode of Cyber Conversations. I am very excited to be joined today by Ido Geffen. Ido is co-founder and CEO of Novee Security. And if you haven't heard of these guys, it's really time that you should. They're a company that's just come out of stealth with over 50 million in funding, building what they call AI-powered hacker for defenders. Today, we're going to talk about what this actually means, why this kind of company is emerging right now, and how this kind of change is going to affect the cybersecurity landscape with the use of AI. But before we dive into all of that, Ido, it's such a pleasure to have you here with me. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Why don't you maybe give a little bit more of an introduction to yourself?
Thank you very much for hosting me. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm sure it's going to be a great discussion. So, a little bit about myself: 20 years of experience in cyber, the first 10 years in the Israeli Security Agency. This is where I've met Omer, my current CTO, and Gon, the third co founder who is leading the product, who was in the A200 unit. The three of us came in with a vast experience when it comes to cyber and how offensive cyber is being done in a nation state level. And over the last 10 years, I've been in multiple startups in executive roles, doing cybersecurity for hospitals and medical devices, cloud security, and non human identity security. And as we will dive deeper, there is something very unique that has changed in the AI technology that made us get a full conviction that this is the time for building a company like Novee that can really disrupt the market. So happy to be here.
Awesome. No, excited to have you here. I think you guys have already been making some noise. You've arguably not been around for long, but you've made your kind of place well known already, which is just an unbelievable achievement. But let's dive into a few things here. And actually, Ido, why don't we start with the fact that obviously you've worked across both offensive, defensive. You've referenced a couple of different things there in terms of where you've been in the market. What kind of was the moment or the realization where you recognized that there was an opportunity or a need, should we say, for a company like Novee to exist?
Yeah, great question. So our aha moment when it comes to building a company like Novee came in September 2024. This is when OpenAI just released the first reasoning model. Back then it was called O1. And Omer Gon and myself, the three of us, pretty geeks. So we were very excited about this type of new technology. Started to read all of the specification card, understand what is really happening here. We understood that for the first time, it's not like LLMs until those days was mostly around you can ask them things like text in and then getting text out. But something fundamentally changed in their ability to really stop before they act and really building for the first time AI agents, something that is like a word that we're hearing a lot, but wasn't here almost 2 years ago. And the fact that now you can utilizing those LLMs like a brain that can reason, can do a chain of thought. But if you're also connecting it to different tools, meaning you can really act in the cyber world, and so it's like a human. Now you have the brain. Now you really have the arms and legs in order to do stuff. And what we've realized that for the first time there is an option to create something that can find novel vulnerabilities in the level of the best penetration tester in the world and in scale. So it was the first time that we thought, okay, maybe we can take this art of finding zero-day vulnerabilities into a science. And if we will be able to achieve it, then we also will have to build the best hacker in the world, the best defender in the world, sorry, because if we will have this capability of detecting new vulnerabilities every day, so we really need to
Mhm.
find also a technology that can help you to fix it as soon as possible for the bad guys will find the same things. Yeah.
Awesome. I think it's a really good overview that you've given there. I think you mentioned something that I really want to reference because you're exactly right that this wasn't technology that was available arguably 2+ years ago, especially if we look at the fact that if you're looking back kind of 5-10 years, realistically, the cybersecurity landscape has changed so significantly in terms of not just the technologies that we have available in terms of how to create and how quickly we can resolve problems, but arguably I suppose, a threat landscape in terms of how big it's now got because this new technology we create is also creating more vulnerabilities. And I think it's becoming this cycle of innovation, but also of intimidation in terms of, okay, like, how do we keep up? And I'd be interested to see you reference kind of the ChatGPT kind of open AI more specifically as when, okay, this is where we recognize that this technology is something that's available and we can really capitalize on. What do you think within the market maybe specifically shifted for the kind of product that you built with Novee to become in demand? Was there anything within the cyber landscape in particular? Was it certain technologies that started being adopted or anything in particular that happened where you were like, oh, okay, not only does this technology exist, but actually there's a real need for what we're about to offer?
Yeah, definitely. So there is something that fundamentally changed in the economics of cybersecurity, and it's coming from two different directions that are really like accelerating one another. From the customer side, let's call it, or from the organizational side of the aisle, you have today the ability to generate much more code with AI assistant tools and vibe coding. So you're seeing that organizations today are developing much more code, much faster, and the amount of application and the complication of those applications is growing dramatically, especially once now organizations are also starting to embed LLMs inside of their application. So you have chatbots and all much more sophisticated applications that are not static, like they're really changing and they have their own LLMs inside of those applications. So you have on the one hand the organization that are changing much, much faster. The exposure of what they're exposing to the outside world is rapidly changing very quickly and expanding. And on the other side, we started to see real evidence. For example, Anthropic published an article a few months ago about a Chinese group that leveraged Anthropic LLMs in order to conduct cyber attacks in a much more autonomous way, much faster, much more sophisticated. So you have those two trends that are coming together, and it's like the perfect storm because the attack surface is changing and growing. And on the other hand, the pace that the bad guys are developing and their ability to run much more cyber attacks that are faster, wider, and more sophisticated is growing at least in the same pace. So those two things and making into the realization today that it's really became from maybe will happen to a hair on fire problem. And the release of Mythos, which is the latest and greatest model of Anthropic, it's just an example of the improvements that we're seeing. That even today, Anthropic says we have such a strong model that is really capable of helping and finding a lot of zero days. So yeah, and we know that the open source models today are only a few months behind, meaning so this storm is we are in this storm, but the storm is just getting stronger and stronger as we're moving.
And I think that's again, like I mentioned earlier, it's what makes it so exciting, but it's also a scary kind of prospect as well with how quickly things can move. And you referenced something there as well about the fact that, of course, yes, on our side, we've got access to all of this technology and so on, but of course, so does the other side of the coin. And when you're looking at the bad actors, and I suppose I always just say bad guys because I don't know, it just makes it sound cooler. But ultimately, the thing with that is they have access to the same technology. And I mentioned time and time again that they have the fortunate position to also not have to work within the ethical parameters that we have to work within when it comes to practicing or refining this technology. But you referenced something earlier, and I want to loop back to it because obviously you've built a purpose trained model rather than just using existing LLMs. And I think that definitely adds a uniqueness to the way that you've worked. Can you break down why does that matter? Because I think it's a key differentiator that's probably worth highlighting.
Yeah, sure. So there are few very, very strong reasons for that. Although it's something that is very hard to do and it's pretty expensive, we decided to go all in about it, that we will train our own proprietary trained model, and for few reasons. First of all, as you mentioned, the bad guys are also improving very, very fast, and we want to make sure that what we are building will be one, two, three, or even four steps before them. And the ability to have a very well-trained LLM that is specialized in finding vulnerabilities, it is something that we believe that can give us a head start on them. Okay, so we have something better than what they have, and so this was the core reason for doing it. But it also because once you are deploying your own model, which is based on open source models, then you can also suggest something that represents a much easier pricing because Tokens today are the new gold and or the new oil, and what we're seeing that organization wants to move from one time assessment, let's say once in a year or twice in a year, in their applications to something that is much more continuous, doing it in the pace of the software development lifecycle, meaning you need to do an assessment much faster, much deeper, into much more apps, and you do need to find a way to reduce the cost in order for you to being able to do it all the time without a real concern about, oh my God, how much it's going to cost me. So the cost perspective here is really also an issue when it comes to the scale of the problem. So if you are able to run something that is very, very capable and the cost is pretty low, like those two things really can give you the opportunity to be before the bad guys.
And I think you, again, to highlight something you mentioned there, because one thing that's really critical right now is this continuous situation of you need to continuously be assessing the threats. You need to be able to continuously have that support system there in terms of, okay, something's happened. Like, how do we, on all sides of the coin? And that's because the threat landscape's evolving so much. So obviously, therefore, you don't want to, okay, we've done it today. We'll just circle back to this again in 12 months' time for our annual review, because ultimately you then left yourself vulnerable for 12 months. So it's a really interesting way, but obviously a really valuable way to build that. But the other thing you mentioned there, of course, is the cost factor, because especially right now, we're seeing a running trend with, as much as cyber is one of the most critical parts that people should really be considering how significant the budget needs to be, it's also where the budget continuously gets stripped back from. And the challenge with that being, ultimately, then the CISOs or security leaders are pretty tightly strapped for how much they're spending. So that's also
Sure.
really important. Obviously, you guys came out of stealth, and from the almost conception, came out of stealth in a relatively quick time with a phenomenal funding round as well, already gaining traction with early customers. You've referenced quite a few different things there, but that is still unbelievably fast and pretty unheard of in the industry. What do you think has drove that level of momentum? Do you think that kind of people were just sat back to being like, wow, this is something that we just really needed? Or is there anything else that's really driven that to be able to have such an impressive journey in arguably a very short space of time?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the thing that even surprised me, and I think also like the board in a good way, is the fact that once you're in the beginning, and again, this is the first time that I'm doing a startup in the cybersecurity domain, and in the beginning, you have a long ideation phase, and you're trying to understand the trends. And one of the key challenges is finding relevant organizations that will willing to work with you. And what was pretty unique at Novi, since pretty much from the early days, is the fact that the demand was much stronger than we were able to accommodate. So on the one hand, we were able to illustrate the fact that we are hiring the best talent in the world when it comes to people with vast experience in the nation state level cybersecurity, but also the best AI researchers that
Mm,
know how to work with AI. And so this combination that we can build the best team in the world to solve this problem and think that the demand is just out there, meaning we are seeing that from a lot of good meetings, start with a meeting, yeah, we want to do a proof of value tomorrow. We want to purchase it pretty quickly. It feels that we were, with a little bit of luck, to be honest, in the exact moment that the technology was in the right place, but also the realization of the market that it's not an if, it's now when it comes to cyber attacks that are being generated or being supported very much by frontier AI models. And in many times, because it's running so fast, there is no other way to protect yourself because for the first time, there is an opportunity to really scale the ability of finding novel vulnerabilities. And
yeah.
until very lately, it was okay, so I will do manual penetration testing once in a year or so, and I will be pretty much equivalent to the manual hackers that will try to break into my organization. But now, because they have this type of sophistication that it can be done all the time
Yeah.
across all of my attack surface, we really felt that we are still feeling it that the demand is so high. Then it literally came from our board pretty early on. So this is the time to doubling down. We need more people, we need more sellers, we need to market it. So the ability to raise a lot of money came very, very quickly, but it's also very was supported by all of the needed indications from how quickly we're generating pipeline, how quickly we are able to move from an interest to testing our product to a paying customer that is saying good things about us and finding us very valuable, and many times even being a reference of ours to other organizations. So, so it just made sense on that front that this is the time to move much faster and let's press on the gas pedal and to expand as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. You've got to capitalize on the momentum, right? I mean, ultimately, you've identified that there was need in the market, but also then I think what backs that up is then when you start to go to market and people go, "Oh, I'm so glad you've got this. Yes, how do we buy it?" Because that's typically the hardest part is normally getting people to see the value proposition. If you've got people that are then referring on as well and going, "This, you really should have a look at this. This is doing exactly what it says on the tin." Because ultimately, and let's be really candid here, a lot of vendors in the industry talk about we'll solve all these problems and they don't actually always do what they say at the surface level. And I think that's also a big challenge within the industry. So I think everybody talks about the cybersecurity ecosystem being so intimately connected, and it really plays into its value in situations like this as well, because ultimately people trust what other individuals are using when they say, hey, this is a really great product. Understandably, you can also see why people wanted to get behind this from the venture side, because I think the momentum is only just starting as well. I can only imagine the trajectory that's ahead of you. And one thing I think it's probably worthwhile for anybody that's tuning in here, and we've touched base on a high level of obviously what Novee's offering, but I think it's probably worthwhile mentioning if you could break down to us a little bit more about what we mean when we talk about something like an AI hacker and really what that, I suppose, wider solution looks like, because we can see in the intricacies why there's demand in the market and ultimately what you're solving, but it'd probably be interesting to get a little bit more insight into what that does look like.
Yeah, of course. So really at Novi, we built the best AI hacker in the world. It is also an AI defender. The way that we did it is really cloning ourselves, our knowledge, the hundreds of years of combined experience that our team have in AI and cyber into a hive mind of AI agents that knows how to hack into complex systems, but also personalizing the defense mechanisms. And the concept that we and how we've architectured the product is, let's think about those LLMs, right? The large language models as a brain. Okay, the brain is brilliant, like a brain of a person. Okay, so the brain is brilliant, like a person with 160 or 180 IQ, but this person doesn't really have any experience or expertise when it comes to finding vulnerabilities and how to fix those type of vulnerabilities. So the way that we modeled it, we said, okay, let's treat the models as the brain, and now let's take the experience that we have on how we trained hundreds of penetration testers in our past. And basically, the curriculum on how to train a very good penetration tester is by providing this person familiarity with a lot of different tools, techniques, and a lot of good examples that they can learn from. So, what we did in the technology side of it is, first of all, providing to those LLMs a lot of different tools that they can use, from code generation tools like a Python interpreter. So the agents will be able to generate code by themselves. They have a browser, so they can really browse into application like a real human, okay, and press on the different buttons, etc. So this is providing a lot of tools and also hacking tools like SQL Map, which is a tool that specializes in finding SQL injection vulnerabilities. So now those agents have a lot of tools that we provided them. The second thing is the techniques. So what we did is a lot of prompt engineering. This is where our cyber researchers are articulating themselves, their knowledge, the workflow, the techniques that only they know into prompts. A lot of very good examples. This is dynamically loaded knowledge that we are injecting into the memory of the agent with real vulnerabilities exploitation from the wild. And this is why how the agents have a very good example that they can learn from. Now, once you're combining all of that together, a very strong brain, the LLM, which is improving all the time, with the right tools, with the right prompts, and with the right examples, now you can really connect it all together into a hive mind of AI agents that each one of them has a specific task. So the first ones are doing the hacking stuff, the mapping, the analyzing, planning what they're going to test, and then looking for vulnerabilities. Once they're finding vulnerabilities, a vulnerability or vulnerabilities. This is where we are turning on our defensive AI agents, which are validating the results, making sure that what we have found is a true positive. And by the way, this is one of the hardest challenges today with AI, validating that the results that it brings you, it's really true positive. So we have a lot of mechanisms and technology around that. And once the issue was being validated, then how to fix it. So we have an agent that, based on all of the context that we collected, guiding the customer on how exactly they can mitigate or remediate the issues that have been found. More than welcome to ask questions.
No, it absolutely is. I always say, look, if I'm nodding along and can understand what you're talking about, then anybody can. So I think you translated it in a really strong way there. But ultimately, I think it's great that you have both sides of the coin again. And it's testament to the experience of you, but also the team. And I think it just also goes to show what you're trying to say is you guys have just got a very intelligent team behind you that have then built a very intelligent kind of product that's it's almost sounds like it's really tailored to the environment that they're in, which I think is the most valuable part because I think it's easy now to build this bog standard, okay, and then it's agentic, but it's still built off the same thing. It's not necessarily able to adapt for environments and different situations and so on. But it also sounds super easy to use, which I think is arguably the most important part, other than actually what the ROI is. But we can already see that from what you've shared. I'd be really interested to then ask the question the technology, obviously, there's huge demand here. It sounds phenomenal what you've been able to build and take to market in a short space of time. What do you think that when this is more widely adopted in the market, when you guys have been around even longer, you've been able to get more and more customers, and this is something that's a little bit more widespread in terms of who's using it, how do you think it might evolve what cybersecurity looks like within the next couple of years?
I think that what's happening here, the pace of change is so rapid, and the way I see it, the offensive security market is really running very, very fast, and we're seeing the pace of adoption. I think that 2026 and 2027 is also the years that this vertical, even Gartner already started to call it a cost, continuous offensive security testing. I think that it's going to be a huge category like we had until today, like EDRs and cloud security. So this is definitely something that is happening now. And we're already seeing even very large financial institutions and others that are starting to working with this type of technology. And it's just inevitable, right? Because we will see more and more cyber attacks that are leveraging AI, and you don't have any way to validate if you have any business logic vulnerabilities without utilizing the same technology. So prediction is that the adoption of this type of technology is much faster than that we've witnessed. I was at Orca Security, a VP of product, and I saw the pace adoption of cloud security, native application security. And here I think that it's even going to be faster from all of the reasons that I just described. And I would add to that now organizations are also embedding into their workflows, into their applications, AI agents by themselves. So they really have to find, and there is no solution that can really test it in dynamic way. So they really have to adopt very, very quickly this type of solutions. Basically, it's the same pace that now code developing is changing. It's changing so quickly. And in the end, cybersecurity is part of software development under finding bugs, because vulnerabilities are specifically, and other bugs, you have specific types of bugs, which are security vulnerabilities. So we are on the same wave of how quickly the code development market is changing. So the same goes to finding vulnerabilities inside of those applications that are so quickly being developed and being changed, being jumping very quickly into production.
Absolutely. I think what you highlighted there as well is it's the start of the journey, but there's going to be a significant reward. Is that the word I'm looking for? Kind of the word I'm looking for in terms of the adoption of technology like this. It's really interesting when we hear about the fact that it's this shift from security being something maybe more like periodic and reactive to something that's continuous and more attacker driven. And ultimately, I think that's also an industry mindset shift to realize that this is continuous. As I mentioned, it's not something that's, oh, it's a tick box kind of thing that's once every quarter or even every year or so on. It has to be a continuous in demand. We're doing this all the time. Honestly, it's been phenomenal to have you on. I feel like we could probably keep on going all day. As everybody knows at this point, I love to chat about these things, but I think what you guys are building is just so exciting. The momentum you've had already is absolutely incredible, and I genuinely cannot wait to watch you guys continue on the trajectory that you've already set. But I think this is a really great place to close it out. So thank you so much for coming on and breaking this down.
Yeah.
Like it's been great to hear you talk about what you've been building in a bit more detail. And obviously, to everybody tuning in, make sure to share this episode with your security peers, like, subscribe, and obviously get connected with Ido and the team at Novee Security, especially if you can, and I imagine you will, see the value in what they're building. Definitely a journey that's worthwhile following along. But if anything, encourage you to get in touch and hear a little bit more about what they're up to. But that is it for today. So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all next time for more conversations that are shaping cyber.